The Markandeya Purana Part 2. Om Shakti Hrim Namah Shivaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Anasuya. Sumati told Mahamati another story. There was a city named Pratisthana, and in that city there lived a Brahmana. He was a leper, but despite this his wife continued to serve him faithfully. She oiled, bathed and fed him. The Brahmana, however, had a foul temper and continually scolded his wife. But the wife regarded her husband as her god. The Brahmana once wanted to go out for a walk at night. The wife took him up on her shoulders and went out of the house. The sky was full of clouds, and the only light was that which came from streaks of lightning. The sage Mandavya was lying there on a road, and in the darkness the Brahmana's limbs touched the sage. Mandavya then cursed, "The person whose limbs have disturbed me will die a terrible death as soon as the sun rises." Hearing this, the wife said, "Let the sun not rise then." Since the Brahmana's wife had accumulated a lot of punya by faithfully serving her husband, the sun stopped rising. Many days passed and the gods were alarmed. What would happen to the earth if the sun stopped rising? In a panic, the gods went to Brahma for his advice. Brahma realized that all this was happening because of the powers of a woman who was devoted to her husband, a pativrata. Consequently, it could be counteracted only if the powers of another pativrata were used. Such a pativrata was Anasuya, the wife of sage Atri. He asked the gods to pray to Anasuya for deliverance. This the gods did, and Anasuya promised to help so that the sun might rise again. She went to the Brahmana's wife and persuaded her to let the sun rise. Anasuya also told the Brahmana's wife that should her husband die, Anasuya would ensure that he was brought back to life. After 10 days, a continuous darkness, the sun rose. The Brahmana immediately died. But Anasuya had accumulated a lot of punya by being a pativrata. With these powers she resurrected the Brahmana and blessed him that he would live for 100 years. Not only did the Brahmana revive, his disease and old age also disappeared. The gods were exceedingly happy and showered down flowers on Anasuya. They also wanted to give her a boon, and Anasuya desired the boon that Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva should be born as her sons. Brahma's second son was Atri. After many days had passed, Brahma was born as the son of Atri and Anasuya. This was none other than the moon god Chandra. Vishnu was born as the son Dattatreya, and Shiva was born as the son Durvasa. There was a king named Kritavirya. After Kritavirya died, his ministers wished to make his son Arjuna the king. But Arjuna refused. "I don't want to be a king and go to Naraka," he said. "Particular taxes are too much for me to handle. Traders give only 12 on their earnings to the king as taxes. Herdsmen and farmers give 1/6. The king must not take more than if prescribed, otherwise he goes to hell. Moreover, why are these taxes given? So that the king protects his subject. Having received the taxes, if a king does not properly protect his subject, he again goes to hell. I don't wish to be a king unless I can be the best among all the kings on earth." Amongst Arjuna's advisors was the sage Garga. Hearing what Arjuna had said, Garga advised him to pray to sage Dattatreya, who lived in a cave in a Mount Sakhya. Dattatreya would tell Arjuna how to be a good king. It was to Dattatreya that the gods and Indra had prayed when they had suffered at the hands of the Asuras. The Devas and the Asuras fought a terrible war. The ruler of the Asuras was then Jamha. The Devas lost the war and fled hither and thither. When they went to Brihaspati for advice, Brihaspati told them to pray to Dattatreya. The gods went to Dattatreya Ashrama and tried to please him. They offered him food and garlands. They stood up when Dattatreya stood up and walked when Dattatreya walked. At last Dattatreya asked them, "Why are you serving me? What is it that you want?" The gods told him that the problem was Dattatreya asked the gods to invite the Asuras for another war, but the war should take place in front of Dattatreya's eyes, since Dattatreya's glance would reduce the power of the demons. This was what the gods did. They summoned the demons to another war, and when they were beaten by the demons, they fled towards Dattatreya's hermitage. The Asuras followed the Devas there and discovered Dattatreya's wife Lakshmi. Remember that it was Vishnu who had been born as Dattatreya. Lakshmi was so beautiful that the Asuras forgot all about the Devas. They decided to kidnap Lakshmi. So they put her on a palanquin, raised the palanquin on their shoulders, and started to leave for home. Dattatreya then told the Devas that this was the time to attack. When Lakshmi was on person's feet, that person obtained a house. When Lakshmi was on a person's lap, that person obtained a son. When Lakshmi was in a person's heart, that person obtained all his desires. But when Lakshmi was on a person's head, this means that Lakshmi was about to forsake that person and live for someone else. This was what had happened to the Asuras, and this was therefore the time to attack. The gods then killed the demons with their weapons. After hearing this story, Arjuna went to Dattatreya's hermitage. He worshipped the sage, bathed his feet, and offered honey, garlands, fruits, and water. Dattatreya was pleased and agreed to give Arjuna a boon. Arjuna in fact wanted several boons. He wanted to have the knowledge of tracking down enemies, to be unrivalable in battle, to have 1,000 arms, to be able to travel freely everywhere, and to die at the hands of the best among men. All these boons were granted. Then Arjuna's coronation ceremony took place. The Gandharvas, the Apsaras, the rishis, the mountains, the rivers, the oceans, the trees, the gods, the snakes, the birds, and all the humans came to the magnificent coronation. Arjuna became the king of the kingdom of Halyk, and he promised that there was no need for anyone else in his kingdom to take up arms. He alone would protect everyone. Many years ago there was a powerful king named Shatrajit. Shatrajit had a son. The prince was also very strong. He was as wise as Brihaspati, as brave as Indra, and as handsome as two Ashwinis. Sometimes the prince studied the Shastras, sometimes he listened to songs, sometimes he wrestled and learned other forms of fighting. He also knew how to handle horses, elephants, and chariots. The prince had many friends among the sons of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyu. Ashvatara was the king of the Nagas, snakes, and Ashvatara had two sons. These sons were young and handsome. Once these two sons adopted the form of Brahmanas and came to us. They began to play with the prince and his friends, and they got so attached to the prince that they could not bear to be parted from him. They spent the night in the underworld, but during the day they were always with the prince. After some days had passed, Astavakra called his son. "Sons," he said, "what is the matter? I never see you during the day. You come back home only at night. Where do you go?" The sons then told him about the prince whose name was Ritadvaja. This prince had so many good qualities that the two sons of Ashvatara could not bear to be parted from him. Ashvatara then asked his sons if they had done anything for their friend. There was much gold and a lot of jewels in the underworld. Why not take some of these for Ritadvaja? The son says that there was no point in taking any of these for Ritadvaja. He had plenty of them himself. But Ashvatara insisted that there must be some way in which his son could repay their debt to their friend Ritadvaja. The sons then narrated a story that they had from Ritadvaja. Once upon a time, a Brahmana named Gaulava brought a beautiful horse to King Satrajit. He told Satrajit, King, a deity, a demon, came and destroyed everything in my ashrama. He adopts the forms of lions and elephants and disturbs my meditation. I was very unhappy, but suddenly this horse fell from heaven. And I had divine words which said that this horse was a very special horse. It would never get tired and it could travel anywhere in the world. Its name was Kuvalya, and your son Ritadvaja would ride on this horse and destroy the Daitya. Please accept the horse for your son. Satrajit accepted the horse and gave it to his son Ritadvaja. He also sent Ritadvaja and the horse to Galava's hermitage. Because the horse was called Kuvalya, Ritadvaja came to be known as Kuvalya Ashva. The demon adopted the form of a bow and attacked the hermitage, but Kuvalya Ashva took up his bow and shot an arrow at the bow. The bow was hurt and fled into the thick forest, but the prince followed in pursuit. The demon finally entered a deep pit inside the earth, but the prince followed him there as well. It was, however, so dark there in the underworld that the prince could not find the demon. Instead, he discovered a city with many golden palaces. There were no people in the city, but on a golden seat in one of the palaces there was a very beautiful woman. The woman and the prince fell in love with each other, and the prince found out that the woman's name was Madhavasa. She was the daughter of Vishvavasu, the king of the Gandharvas. But an asura named Patavaketu had kidnapped her and brought her to the underworld, and was now threatening to marry her. Kuvalyashva and Madhavasa decided to get married, but a priest was needed to sanctify the ceremony. So Madhavasa thought of her guru Tomburu, and the guru teacher immediately arrived. Tomburu married Kuvalyashva and Madhavasa to each other. But as soon as Kuvalyashva and Madhavasa prepared to leave the underworld, the deities got to know. Patavaketu and the other demons attacked Kuvalyashva with clubs, swords, maces, spears and arrows. The prince easily repelled these weapons and himself took up the weapon that is known as Tvashtra. The weapon burned up all the deities. Kuvalyashva and Madhavasa then returned to Satrajit, and Satrajit was very happy to learn of her son's deeds. A son who preserves whatever fame or wealth is left to him by his father is Madhyama or average son. A son who increases it or outsurpasses his father is an Uttama or superior son. And a son who diminishes it is an Adhama or inferior son. Kuvalyashva had proved himself to be an Uttama son, superior one. Cursed is he who becomes famous by his father's name, but blessed is he who becomes famous by his son's name. After a few days, Satrajit called his son to him and asked him to travel around the world, protecting the Brahmanas and killing the Danavas who disrupted the path of Dharma. This is what Kuvalyashva did. He spent the mornings in patrolling the world and afternoons with Madhavasa at home. On the banks of the river Yamuna, Kuvalyashva once discovered Tavaketu, Patavaketu's young brother. Kuvalyashva did not recognize Talaketu, since Talaketu was in the form of a sage. But Talaketu recognized his enemy and said, "Prince, I am trying to perform a yajna here, but I do not have the money for the dakshina. Please give me the necklace that you are wearing around your throat, so that I can raise the money for the fee. And please stay here and protect my hermitage while I am going to have a bath. I will return soon." Kuvalyashva did as Talaketu desired, but instead of going for a bath, Talaketu went to Satrujit city. He made up a story about Kuvalyashva having been killed while fighting with the deities, and produced the necklace as evidence. The prince's relatives were greatly distressed on hearing this news, and Madalasa died from the shock. The miserable Satrajit performing the Shraddha funeral ceremony for his daughter-in-law. Talaketu then returned to Kuvalyashva and thanked him for having waited. When Kuvalyashva returned home, he learned what had happened in his absence. Ever since then, Kuvalyashva only pined for Madalasa. Having heard the story from his sons, Ashvatara, king of the Nagas, decided to perform tapasya. He went to the place of pilgrimage that is known as Twaksha Valtarana and is in the Himalayas. There he started very difficult tapasya. He prayed to the goddess Saraswati. When Saraswati arrived to grant a boon, Ashvatara craved that he and his brother Kambala might become excellent singers. This boon Saraswati granted. Ashvatara and Kambala then went to Mount Kailasha. There they started to sing so as to please Shiva. The songs were so beautiful that Shiva was delighted and offered to grant a boon. Ashvatara then desired the boon that Madalasa might be born again as his own daughter, with the qualification that she would be born as she had died, in the prime of youth, and not as baby. Moreover, she would be born as Jatismara, and learned in the practice of yoga. Ashvatara was a many-hooded snake. Thanks to Shiva's blessing, an adult Madalasa was born from one of Ashvatara's hoods. Ashvatara did not tell anyone about this, not even his sons. He kept Madalasa hidden from view. His sons kept going to play with Kuvalyashva as they had been used to doing, and one day Ashvatara told his sons, "Why don't you bring your friend to meet me?" So Kuvalyashva accompanied the two sons of Ashvatara. The three friends first came to the river Gamati. The route to the underworld went down from the bed of the river. At first Kuvalyashva was greatly surprised, for he still did not know that his two friends were the son of the king of the Nagas. They had come to him in the forms of Brahmanas. In the underworld, his two friends adopted the forms of snakes. Jewels shone on their hoods. The underworld was full of snakes, babies, young ones, and old ones as well. The women among them were beautiful jewelry. The sounds of singing and the playing of musical instruments could be heard. Finally, Kuvalyashva was brought to the place where King Ashvatara sat on golden seat. Kuvalyashva bowed before the king, and Ashvatara embraced him. He blessed the prince. Then he sent him away to bathe and have rice and honey with his two friends. After all this was over, Ashvatara called the prince to him again. He said, "Prince, you are a guest in my house. Tell me, what gift would you like to have?" Kuvalyashva replied, "King, there is nothing that I desire. Thanks to your blessing, I have everything that I want. My father has been ruling for 1,000 years on earth, and you rule here in the underworld. I am young and have no lack of riches. What more do I want? Nothing." Ashvatara said, "All right, I will give you something that you really desire." And he brought forth Madalasa. At first, Kuvalyashva thought that the form of Madhavasa was really an illusion, Maya Shakti, and Ashvatara was not averse to permitting this deception to remain for a short while. But then he told Kuvalyashva the true story, and happily Kuvalyashva and Madhavasa returned to earth. Great were the festivities that followed, great was the rejoicing. After Satyajit died, Kuvalyashva became king in his place. Kuvalyashva and Madhavasa had a son named Vikranta. Madhavasa was white due to the boon received from Shiva. She began to teach her son words of wisdom as he grew. He learned that the physical body was of no importance and that material pursuits were merely an illusion. The net result of Vikranta's acquiring all this supreme knowledge was that he became totally disinterested in the material pursuit and lived a detached life. A second son was born to Kuvalyashva and Madhavasa, and this son was named Shatrumardana. Again Madhavasa began to teach her son, and this son also lost all interest in material pursuit. And a third son named Suvahu was born, and again the same thing happened. The first three sons had been named by Kuvalyashva. When the fourth son was born, Kuvalyashva asked Madhavasa to name their son, and Madhavasa named him Alarka. Alarka, Kuvalyashva asked, "What does Alarka mean?" "What about the name you gave?" replied Madhavasa. "Vikranta, Shatrumardana and Suvahu. Do they mean anything? Any person identity is really the Atman soul and not the mere physical body. The same Atman is everywhere. If that is the case, what does it mean to say that someone is brave, or has strong arms, or triumphs over his enemies? The Atman has no enemies." When Madhavasa began to teach Alarka the knowledge of the Atman, Kuvalyashva protested. He wanted to have at least one son who did not become completely detached and disinterested in material life. He did not want Alarka to do what his brothers had done. Alarka should be taught that which befits a Kshatriya. And so that this is what Madhavasa taught Alarka. Madhavasa's teaching were as follows. She taught him the duties of a king. The king's primary duty was to ensure that his subjects were satisfied and happy. The king should check that his ministers and advisors have not been corrupted by enemies. Spies should be employed to find out what enemies were doing. The king could not afford to trust even friends or relatives. As circumstances demanded, a king would have to be both strict and soft. The most important thing was ensure that the karma of the varnas classes at the ashrama stages was followed in kingdom. The main purpose of Rajadharma was to ensure this. There were 4 varnas. The duties of a brahmana were to donate alms, study and perform yajnas. In addition to these 3, the duties of a kshatriya were to protect the earth and take up arms. And apart from donating alms, studying and performing sacrifice, Vaishya duties were trade, agriculture and animal husbandry. A Shudra could also donate alms, study and perform yajnas, but his main duty was to serve the other 3 classes. Anyone who was opposed to the dharma or the 4 varnas went to Naraka. There were 4 ashramas as well. In Brahmacharya ashram, celibate studenthood, one studied faithfully with one's guru. When one wished to enter the Grihasya ashrama, householder stage, one should marry a wife who was once acquired. The duties of householder was honestly earn money and serve one's ancestors, gods and guests. In Vanaprastha ashrama, forest dwelling stage, one was primarily interested in purifying one's Atman. So So, one had to then live on a fruit and roots and sleep on the ground, meditate and serve one's ancestors, gods and guests. When the Atman was purified and one became completely detached, it was time for the fourth and final ashrama of sannyasa, hermithood. In general, the following of the Varna ashrama dharma required trustfulness, cleanliness, non-violence, forgiveness, generosity and satisfaction. Everyone had to follow the system of classes and stages. It was the king's duty to punish those who did anything against the Varna ashrama dharma. Any good householder should follow certain codes of conduct. He should keep aside 1/4 of his earning as savings, use half for living expense and remaining 1/4 as capital. He should get up and down and spend some time in thinking about the Shastras. He should not use rough words, lies, and the like, and should never associate himself with those who were evil. It was forbidden to look at the sun at the time of sunrise or sunset. Combining one's hair, brushing one's teeth, or looking at the mirror should always be done in the morning. One should not argue with one's elders. On a road, the right of way always had to be given to brahmanas, kings, the learned, those laden with baggage, the young, the dumb, the blind, the deaf, the insane, and children. One should not wear clothes or garlands that have been worn by someone else. One should not laugh at those who were stupid, mad, or deformed. It was forbidden to sleep with one's head facing the north or west or the west. It was forbidden to bathe at night except when there was an eclipse. It was forbidden to wipe one's body with one's hand or a towel after having a bath. Black or red clothes were not to be worn. One was not to sleep at the time of sunset, or sunrise, or right after having a bath. It was forbidden to talk while eating. One should wash oneself after sneezing or spitting. Taught by his mother, Alarka became a very learned person. After many years had passed, King Ritadvaja and his wife went off to do tapasya in the forest, and Alarka became king. Before leaving, Madalasa gave Alarka a golden ring and said, "Son, inside this ring there is a letter. Whenever you are greatly distressed, take out the letter and read it." Alarka ruled well, and the people were happy. He punished those who did evil and rewarded those who did good. He performed many yajnas, but also he ruled for many years. His mind did not get detached from material possession. Alarka had a brother named Suvahu, who had gone off to the forest as a hermit. Suvahu realized that sometimes needed to be done so as to teach Alarka true knowledge. He therefore went to the king of Kashi and made him an ally. "Give the kingdom to Suvahu," was the message that the king of Kashi sent to Alarka. Alarka naturally refused, and a war started. The king of Kashi conquered many parts of Alarka's domain. Many among Alarka's retinue went over to the side of his enemy. Even the capital city was under siege. Alarka was very unhappy, and he remembered the ring that his mother had left him. He took out the letter which said, "Give up the company of other people. If you cannot give up other people's company entirely, associate only with those who are good and wise, and give up all desires." Alarka read this letter several times. He accepted his mother's advice of associating oneself with good people, and he thought of the sage Dattatreya. He bowed down before Dattatreya's feet and said, "I am unhappy, please tell me what to do." I will, replied Dattatreya, but first tell me exactly why you are unhappy. This said the king, thinking, and Alarka realized that he was actually the Atman and not the body. The Atman was neither the earth, neither water, ni energy, ni fire, ni the sky. Even if the body suffered, how did it matter to Alarka? Alarka was not the body. Happiness and unhappiness are state of the mind. They do not affect the Atman. The mind was not the Atman. It was the body who was suffering as a result of the king of Kashi's attack. What did the Atman have to do with elephants and chariots? The Atman had no enemies, no unhappiness, no happiness, no cities, no wealth, no horses, no elephants, no soldiers. Alarka told Dattatreya, I have realized what is the true knowledge. Unhappiness comes only from attachment. I am neither happy nor unhappy. I am beyond all this. That is true, answered Dattatreya. As soon as asked you the question, you realize it, what true knowledge is. Unhappiness is due to attachment, and true happiness comes from detachment. But Alarka says that also he realized what the true knowledge was. His mind was still greatly disturbed. How could he pacify his mind? How could he ensure that he was not born again? And Dattatreya taught him about yoga. Yoga was knowledge that made man truly free. It taught man about the union of the Atman with the Paramatman. And that is why it was called yoga or union. Knowledge gave detachment, and detachment also gave knowledge. The true nature of the Atman was realized through pranayama, detachment from material things, and meditation. Pranayama means the control of the two forms of breath, prana and apana. To realize the true nature of the Atman, the yogi had to sit down in a proper posture and meditate. But as soon as the true nature of the Atman was realized, several difficulties started. For this was the time when the yogi began to get strongly attached to material things, and this attachment had to be conquered. It helped if one chanted the sacred word Om. The Atman was like an arrow, and the Paramatman was the target. Chanting Om, the yogi tried to pierce the target with the arrow. Alarka touched Dattatreya's feet. It's my great fortune that I met you, he said. I am thankful to Suvahu and the king of Kashi. Had it not been for them, I would never have learned all this. If you permit, let me return to my kingdom. Dattatreya blessed him. Alarka went to the king of Kashi and said, King, you wanted my kingdom. Take it. I don't wish it. Enjoy it yourself or give it to Suvahu. I don't care. Do with it what you will. The king of Kashi was greatly surprised, but Suvahu was delighted. He told them the reason why he had brought about this strife in the first place, so as to expose Alarka to the path of a true knowledge. It was not that Suvahu desired any part of the kingdom. In fact, now that his end was achieved, he desired to go back to living in the forest. The king of Kashi returned Alarka's kingdom to him, but Alarka was no longer interested in the kingdom. He made his eldest son the king and went off to the forest to do yoga. There he attained true bliss. At this point, Sumati told Mahamati, what have I to do with yajnas? I too am interested in true bliss. I am off to the forest. Eventually, Mahamati joined Sumati in the forest, and both father and son attained true knowledge. Having told Jaimini all this, the birds paused. Om Shakti Hrim Hari Om Tat Sat Soham.